Alright, hello everyone, I am Casey and it is so great to have you here with What We Watched Last Week. A little show we've been doing since the start of the year where we just are breaking down the things we watched. The movies and the shows and the YouTubes and the books. This week I know we're talking about a book. This is not necessarily meant to be a series about reviewing or critiquing every movie we talk about. There's going to be critiques in here, but really this is just about talking about what we watched and starting that discussion and maybe getting more people to watch some of these things that we really enjoy, right? Starting with Billiam, a couple of YouTube videos. Billiam is a YouTube creator here on the YouTube. I watched both his reviewing every tourist trapped outside of Walt Disney World and visiting Florida's weirdest McDonald's on the 20-hour car ride that me and my spouse took down to Florida to visit my nieces. I was excited to maybe stop at any tourist traps mentioned and were along the route, but alas, not a single one was, as we pretty much hugged the Gulf Coast the whole time, and I didn't realize until writing this, everything he was talking about was literally on the opposite side of the state, so that's on me. But I swear I will get to Gatorland and see the Snappies someday, and Wonderworks, as Billiam describes it, looks genuinely fun. Meanwhile, while I thought his video on the Florida McDonald's were interesting, I wasn't sold on anything so hard that I strayed away from my initial desires to try any local restaurants like a little food snob, or, chain restaurants I just don't get in here up here in New England, like Cookout, Bojangles, or Zaxby's, or try my own seafood bake that turned out really pretty rocking. So thank you, The Art of Escapism Cooking by Mandy Lee. Whether I was sold on going to a slightly fancier McDonald's or not, I think Billiam's recent tourism videos have been really entertaining, and all his series retrospectives that he normally does are equally funny, critical, and very untoxic. As someone with family who lives in Florida, Billiam gives the Florida man a good name more than anyone I can think of. And while we were down in Florida visiting my nieces, we put on Moana, and I don't think I have gotten a chance to really watch this with a small human, the intended audience. And while I've always adored Moana in its own right, it is an entirely different experience watching this with a toddler at home where they can sing and clap and laugh and giggle without any single reservation. Moana is all about a confident and well-meaning not princess with the same authority of a princess breaking out of her people's isolationism to save them literally from evil coconut mold, and figuratively from a stagnant culture, sailing into the unknown to see how far she'll go with the animal sidekick I did not expect, and a shape-shifting scorpion king demigod. Oh, and the ocean is sentient and literally on our side here, so it's really hard to lose. Moana is not a perfect movie by any means, but the movie has enough built-in magical excuses to explain away what would be absurd plot holes and exceptionally strong characters that don't necessarily initiate the plot but do drive it forward as opposed to just being along for this wet ride. Moana uses the medium of CG animation to great effect with the ocean and around character designs that are fine, but nothing that Disney has not done a dozen times before. This is a movie I do love but would also tweak here and there, but I also can't really say why or how yet, so yeah. Moana's great. Disney's Cinderella from 1950. Again, I have not actually had a chance to experience this movie with another real flesh and blood small human being outside of myself when I was an actual small being. So watching this with my niece and watching her clap and sing with Gus Gus and Cinderella was really heartwarming, and even if I don't adore this movie in particular, it is responsible for some beautiful memories that I hope to never forget. Disney's first return to classic fairy tale storytelling after the Second World War surrounds the titular Cinderella and her awful home life with her stepmother and stepsisters, essentially being forced into servitude for them while anamorphic mice cheer her up until a fairy godmother shows up to get shit done and get her to the prom before prom was a thing. And while I understand the message of this movie is be kind and do good things and good things will come to you, I cannot help but feel how disingenuous that message is at every turn. The little bit of agency our titular princess gets comes far too little too late. Cinderella's mice try harder to make a difference. And I would not discourage anyone from putting this on for their smalls, but I personally personally would rather see any other princess be on the screen. Doctor Who, Marco Polo. Isn't it great that Marco Polo is so kind and understanding as the Doctor and company stumble upon his caravan, commandeering the TARDIS, but, treating our protagonist practically as if they were royalty, genuinely caring for them while some random-ass warlord schemes in the background as our villain. Marco deflects the Doctor's negotiations and flat-out rejects his schemes to get back to our favorite blue police box. The heart of the story is again with Susan and her new bestie, one of the girls traveling with Marco, betrothed to someone not important. While the Doctor is doing his scheming in the background, everyone is really focused on this character and making sure she is supported and that she isn't part of this arranged marriage that she doesn't want to be a part of. It is emphasizing with her that gets us in good graces with Marco Polo and leads our time-traveling crew to be in position to get back to the TARDIS at the end. Even in the novella, which I did for this story, Barbara really gets the shaft. Sure, she is the one who puts a bit of suspicion on the villain's dastardly plans in the first place, but even in her moment of triumph, she needs to be saved by everyone else. While Ian literally rides off into 1200s Asia to help a girl he has never met before. Susan makes the best possible friend, and the Doctor loses the TARDIS in a bet. Outside of knowing what I know now about Marco Polo, this was a very entertaining story to read through. It is mostly just the Doctor trying and failing to get back into and fix the TARDIS while everyone around him deals with the threat of the month. My two favorite characters in the TARDIS crew, Ian and Susan, continue to shine while the Doctor gets to be a little stick in the mud, mostly due to behind-the-scenes issues with William Hartnell's health. Now, the fifth element started this while on vacation, but I had to stop a quarter of the way through for Cinderella. It should be a testament to the production just how much I enjoy the feature, that it's the only thing I wanted to put on after the 20 plus hours of road tripping home in 3 days. When a nondescript evil starts aggressively making its way to future Earth, the most blue-collar super special agent that ever lived works with a cult of people who wish History Channel's Ancient Aliens were real. Turns out, in this movie, they were right all along. And director Luc Besson's wet dream, supreme being to save the day with the last acceptable skybeam in cinema. Breaking down this movie as quick as I usually do doesn't do it justice because there is an absurd amount of stuff crammed into this story. It is constantly moving forward through solid visual and literal storytelling. Bruce Willis doing his straight man works better here than it really does anywhere else. It lets him shine more so than other movies because every single other character is dialed up somewhere between 8 and 11. For better or worse, it depends on your mileage there. If I wanted anything more out of this, it would be a little more subversion. Even on the first viewing, the broader story is very choreographed, but that was also very intentional on Besson's part, and I can't help but support that vision, and I cannot be more happy that this sci-fi action epic exists in the world. And another thing we watched during a lot of that car riding was Clever Dick Films' Doctor Who review, Revised and Expanded, Part 1. Clever Dick Films has been working on a retrospective series going into detail doctor by doctor through the generations, giving important historical context paired with well thought out reviews of some of his personal stories of the world's favorite time-traveling Time Lord. His Doctor Who videos are full of amazing information that I've never heard or seen before, and something I will definitely be referencing again when working on my own month in dedication to the first Doctor I'm planning for this December. Doctor Who Review, Revised and Expanded Part 1, The William Hartnell Era, is a pretty self-explanatory title, diving deep into the pre-production of the classic science fiction series as well as the run of William Hartnell's Doctor. I do not know what else to say that wouldn't be immediately stealing from all of Clever Dick's really hard and great work here, so if that is something you're interested in, definitely check it out. It is well researched, edited, and narrated. Dragon Ball Fight Son Goku, Win Son Goku, also known as Dragon Ball Zero. The second live-action Dragon Ball adaptation is probably the most faithful to the source material, more so than even most of the animated movies, sticking pretty close to the story's beats of the Emperor Pilaf saga from the original Dragon Ball series, in which our little protagonist is minding his own fucking business when he's assaulted and shot at by Bulma, who wants to steal his property and can't get a boyfriend. Taking advantage of Goku's good nature in order to use him as a bodyguard as the pair jump from new adventure to new companion to new companion, hunting down the MacGuffins faster than a little guy goblin and his weirdly armored henchmen. Being such a straightforward retelling, that makes this maybe the worst adaptation of the classic tale Journey to the West I have ever experienced. But at this point, the story has been filtered through so many lenses that is clearly not the point anymore. It is just weird that this is technically an adaptation. The biggest changes of this story come in a few additional fights with the Ox King and Emperor Pilaf himself, neither of which is particularly good, but hey, they tried. Despite being under 2 hours in length, this version of the Pilaf saga feels longer than the 5.5 you would have spent watching the anime. Definitely worth watching if you want to see Poir smoke cigarettes or just like seeing other adaptations, but please don't ask me to watch this again. 2018's The Mule, a dejected old man who needs money and family time, makes the active decision to start running drugs for the cartel. And he kicks at it because he's an old white dude who gets on by being his old white dude self. With a DEAB plot running in the background, gives some solid thematic counterbalancing. Signature old white dude Blondie delivers a solid and personal story about a dejected old white man who wants to have more family time. Mixed in with all of this are some pretty overt themes of racism and generational divide that what I hope is Blondie saying he understands the things that he is saying are racist or that he is being shitty, but he doesn't necessarily understand why. He also definitely believes under the age of 60 spends way too much time on their phones. There's a whole lot more he could have said with the subject matter, but it doesn't feel like he's trying to say anything particularly hateful or toxic here. The cartel in particular sucks, and I'm old and say dumb shit. Spend time with your family. Blondie's more recent movies have been hit or miss with me on a personal level, but this definitely qualifies as a hit. The rising action builds slowly throughout into the happiest ending the character could reasonably hope for while still taking accountability for, everything that happens, drug running. Gorgo, 1961. I see the United Kingdom wanted their own Godzilla, did they? When a group of divers off exploring the coast of a small island near the mainland find a Gorgo, our protagonists do a King Kong and bring the titular kaiju back to the city only to learn that he's just a baby, which means he's gotta have a mama. All in all, Gorgo does what it does pretty well. The story is not doing anything new, but it is well written and performed, and the characters do a lot to keep an otherwise familiar narrative engaging. Gorgo itself has a lot of excellent composition work throughout the production, but the creature design itself is a little doofy looking, wearing its Gojira inspirations on its tokusatsu sleeves. 2018 Solo, a Star Wars story. I do not understand the overall direction of this solo outing, cramming at least 3 movies worth of plot into 130 minutes that still felt 30 minutes too long, with as much character iconography shoved into every corner as it could be. You'd never guess which Star Wars character this is about. His time growing up on the streets. No, I mean his time in the Imperial Navy. No, I'm sorry, I mean his time as a smuggler, that thing we've seen him doing since his first appearance in 1977. In his early years, though, he is climbing the ranks of the underworld in order to get the jobs he needs to make enough money to essentially buy his freedom in the form of his own ship to save his femme fatale love interest. And as much as I don't enjoy the story and pacing, I adore the performances across the board, but our titular protagonist specifically gets a very different adaptation that I would have hoped would have grown throughout the original planned series that was ultimately dropped. Meanwhile, Childish Gambino's performance as Lando, in contrast, is exactly what you would want and expect, and it's a great way to contrast the lead. Ultimately, you have a mostly entertaining, if bloated, studio prequel with an absurd amount of promise wasted by, I hope, studio meddling, wanting to cram more in where it doesn't belong. Doctor Who, The Reign of Terror. A very confident doctor shoves his companions of several adventures out of the TARDIS door, ready to leave. Luckily, Barbara convinced him otherwise because we missed the mark, both spatially and temporally, landing smack dab in the middle of the French Revolution. Our protagonist bounce in and out of capture of both the revolutionaries and the standing government while bumping into Robespierre and Napoleon. Unlike in other Doctor Who historical pieces, here it feels like our crew is just kind of here to watch history unfold versus exploring the moral dilemmas of how culture has changed over time, like in both the Aztecs and in Marco Polo, although there are plenty of conversations regarding the weight of how history is unfolding before everyone's eyes, and the weight of that burden in general. Barbara gets a lot more to do here, here than in previous stories, being one of our prime negotiators while Susan and Ian are both incapacitated and the Doctor is running around doing his own tangent schemes to his own personal delight in a fun new costume. If you are watching the 2013 animated reconstructions from Planet 55 in order to supplement the missing episodes like I had to, the editing is entirely all over the place, and I don't understand why the editing is so weird when we have the original episodes to contrast. I know they were trying to do their own thing to make it more palatable for modern audiences, but I think the editing in these two animated episodes are a huge detriment, while the animation in and of itself, even if it is incredibly low budget, does get a huge range of emotion across, leaving me far more impressed with what we have than upset with its shortcomings. While the story throughout was a little disappointing to me, as some of our protagonists are more or less moved around without a ton of their own agency while the revolution is going on around them. But Barbara finally gets more to do, and the Doctor's pure joy in his own schemes balances out a lot of that slow pace for me. Boy kills world. In a hyper-exaggerated totalitarian hellscape reality, our extremely unreliable mute protagonist, with the voice of a can of beans in his head, is set loose with a singular mission to murder the murderous regime currently in charge. The people in charge are just insane man-children with scary amounts of authority. Making our protagonist very clearly unreliable from the get-go sets the stage for unrestrained artistic freedom and needle drops as we are viewing the narrative through an unreliable point of view. It makes a lot of the story itself plot hole proof in the long run, but that doesn't necessarily mean we don't get too many twists. Some are pretty clearly choreographed thematically, others less so. Sequences of intense, well choreographed fights carry the engagement, while the beats in between feel like they are just there to set up new, more absurd set pieces until we are literally doing murder on a kids show set. A lot of performances make some otherwise unremarkable storytelling fun with beautiful dances of violence sprinkled throughout. 2020's Peninsula. Train to Busan's bigger, louder, in-universe sequel that really wanted to expand the scope of the original while keeping that same emotional core. They may or may not have succeeded depending on your tastes, but the addition of all the random whimsy definitely did not help here. Not that I think the project does well enough to truly expand the scope as much as I think it would like to do so. For unjustifiable reasoning, our protagonists decide to travel back into a successfully quarantined South Korea, shacking up with an excellent little zombie murdering family and avoiding post-apocalypse gangs with their own little fucked up society. All the themes you'd expect in a big-scale zombie movie are front and center. I mentioned in the World War Z watch earlier this year that I preferred my CGI zombie waves in cramped spaces like a train, and that stands. The cramped terror is present in the opening and is immediately lost for a grand citywide apocalypse, where all the benefits and issues with zombie waves are front and center. Despite solid performances all around, half of which brings the energy of a serious drama and the other half brings the energy of a Mad Max hellscape, the emotional core was also a little lost with everything else happening going on, even if the final sequences is great with some iconic shots that could match what you saw in Train to Busan. Tournament of Champions 5. Guy Fieri needs no introduction. He is an absolute treasure who values community and family and charity and competition. I don't usually follow competition shows. Too often it feels like the competition comes down to the personal story over individual achievement or skill as a tiebreaker. Tournament of Champions, or TOC, handles that by making both the judges unknown to the contestants, so seasoned chefs can't cater to the individual judges' tastes, as well as keep contestants unknown to the judges. So the judges can't be like, oh, that's my friend, I want to give him bonus points. Dishes are presented by two great food experts, Justin and Simon. Everyone going in blind makes for the most fair tournament any judging-based competition could ever be. Not that the individual chefs in the tournament, celebrity and professional chefs invited by Fieri and the production, don't bring heart and energy into every round. I was personally rooting for Tobias Dorzon to win the whole time, but you can tell how much this tournament means to each and every contestant. On top of that, everyone chefing really is a master in pulling out all the stops against the randomizer that decides what is cooked at the very last minute of every round. So people also aren't prepping for this, or can't prep in this the way you normally would. There cannot be a more honest and quality cooking competition out there, and if there is, I would love to know about it. Tell me. 2011's Super 8. We did an ET, but our terrestrial is a little more extra in every way. Big and extra, angry and and extra murdery. The group of little Goonies we follow around trying to make a no-budget zombie movie while the military stumbles a cover-up into the laps of children, giving us double the things our little losers club have to worry about. Oh, and there's a bunch of family trauma thrown in for good measure. The little actors that the point of view follows all hit their marks phenomenally, and it has been great to see a lot of them continue to shine in the 15 years since this was originally released. There is also so much constantly going on in the story that it can't help but be moving forward all the time. With the few moments we are given to breathe used to dive deep into character development, every character with screen time is memorable in their own way. Classic tricks save on what would be an overblown creature budget, while scenes that rely on computer effects lacked a little weight, even if they are animated beautifully with actors flawlessly in not danger. But that never once took away from the fun and adventure that we wouldn't see again until things got a little strange on Netflix. I cannot recommend this enough, and will probably be putting this on again very soon to watch with people who haven't seen it yet. Killer Clowns from Outer Space. I watched this in preparation for Dead Meat's Kill Count Recount on Tubi, following the adventures of teen protagonist and his piggy friend as an invasion of aliens that just so happen to look like clowns. Maybe they're like ancient aliens, man, that inspired clowns. Descends on our small town, harkening back to classic alien invasion horror stories, while twisting the dark humor to its most clownish degree. Killer Clowns has camp that cannot be denied. The whole production was built on odd premises and odder reactions. Whether or not is appreciated is up to the watcher. The individual performances each do their part to add to a very intentional tone that delights in stretching its effects to the best of their capabilities with what was available there. This was a feature I did not originally enjoy, but have since grown much more of an appreciation for, especially upon a rewatch. I adore how much fun it looks like everyone is having during the production, and the clown whimsy is delightful in its own right. So happy to put this on for a rewatch. Thank you, Dead Meat, for, forcing me to. Recommending. 1981's Graduation Day. I am watching the Joe Bob Briggs interlaced version on Shudder's last drive-in series, so we got plenty of fun breaks crammed with trivia from our host Joe Bob and Darcy. Now, Graduation itself follows a few characters. It's hard to tell who exactly is the protagonist, since everyone not getting got has equal shade thrown on them in order to keep the killer a mystery, all centered around a high school's track team at the end of school year, graduation day. There is a whole lot of queer subtext that is handled far better than one might expect in a 1980s trauma movie, and the movie has a whole lot to say about school officials abusing position of powers. That being said, between awkward dialogue and horrific pacing, despite the director sticking to a kill every 9 minutes, this was a little rough for me to get through, although it could be because I started it past my bedtime. 2024's Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga. See that guy over there? Looks a bit like Thor? Yeah, he's a rat bastard and he needs to die. That's the movie, with all the beautiful post-apocalypse backdrop that George Miller established in Fury Road, and along with all the political undertones that come with it. Furiosa gets a far more traditional adventure than her Mad counterpart ever did, a gas and leather-obsessed Conan the Barbarian that triples down on the trauma, but cannot end in our protagonist's ultimate hollow victory, since that already happened in the future. It is an absolute delight to see actors return to characters where appropriate, and others reimagined by great actors making the roles familiar but their own. Because of the more traditional story, the picture itself moves at a much slower pace than Fury Road. Not that that is a bad thing, as when the action sequences come, and they come aplenty, they are as bold as in the previous installment, if not a little more ambitious in addition. This is a great action adventure brought to screen by George Miller that stands entirely on its own, but I personally can't wait to put it back to back with Fury Road when it comes out on Blu-ray. And I cannot express, if you can see this in theaters, please try to. Me and my spouse saw a noon showing Saturday, and the theater was unfortunately completely empty, and that's sad because the movie was great. And that would be everything we watched last week, or the last 2 weeks. I know a lot more was crammed in there because it's weeks 3 and 4 combined, so thank you kindly for your patience and being fantastic in your own ways. I don't have any crazy updates this week, just gonna keep on keeping on with school, movies, and work, so if you have a chance to go out and do something good, go out and do something good today. Alright?